Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including how Joe Biden was insulated during his presidency, the measures that were taken, the people that were around him doing it, so on and so forth. And then we're going to talk about the death, basically, of Mike Johnson's budget bill that he was trying to bring to the floor, and Trump basically said, if anybody votes for it on our side, you're going to get primaried. So we'll talk about both of those things. We'll also end today with our daily delight. That story is meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But hey, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our dip, dive, and dodge segment. We're going to roll the intro here, and I'm actually going to do it this time. And perfect. I think we should have had enough time to insert it there. So how this works is I am a politician. I have myself reading some ChatGPT prompts. One of them is a question that the reporter is going to ask me, essentially. And the other one is a talking point that I want to get to. It's completely randomly generated. It pops up. I haven't seen them yet. So we're going to try to do it on the fly. We're going to dip, dive, and dodge and get away from whatever they want me to talk about in the media and get over to the talking point that I have. And then there's also a little bit of self-promotion thrown in there as well. If you don't understand, well, maybe you'll understand once we go through it. So first, I will be the reporter for a big newspaper in the state of Oklahoma. Mayor, sir, this local story has been brewing for quite some time, and I know that we've heard about this education fund that you are trying to put through. It's a local education fund. It gives communities more opportunity and more control over what their school system does. It is something that can be allocated to them specifically. How do you feel about the pushback from the community on this with the increase in their taxes? How do you respond to their concerns going into this next election cycle? Now I will be the mayor. Well, my kind friend from the Oklahoma Times, I greatly appreciate you coming out here and speaking to the concerns of the people that I so deeply, deeply care about and that I represent here in our great city. And we have had for too long a system that does not work for the people. Our school system, our infrastructure. We need to retailer all of these programs in order to put the local person, the individual, the citizen of our city first. And that is why, along with this education fund, I'm also putting forward a new proposal to have a state infrastructure renewal partnership. We're going to partner with other municipalities. We're going to throw in our money together, and we are going to ensure that those resources are spent properly to increase the roads, the quality of the roads, as well as the different infrastructure that we use to transport goods between our towns and make sure that our communities stay connected. This is something that is vital to me and the people that I care about and the citizens that I represent. And if you want to hear more about these grand plans where we address the citizens, we have them come on and we talk, you should listen to the podcast. I do it with my wife. She's a lovely lady. It's called Our State, Our Future: Conservative Solutions for Progress. And I think that in Oklahoma, we can bring this progress, we can bring these solutions to bear, and then it will be better for every Oklahoman. Thank you for your time. So you see how it goes. They were asking a question about an education fund that probably didn't want to talk about because it's raising taxes, and then we spun it to something else that everybody can agree on, infrastructure. So now, with that said, let's actually get into our first article. Enough with the fun and games, though. It is fun. There's no doubt about that. This first article, it's a long, long expose that has come out from the Wall Street Journal. And for anybody who's been paying attention to politics throughout the last 4 years, or even just the White House, there is no doubt in a lot of people's minds that Joe Biden is not 100% there. Then that leads some to question whether or not he is truly governing, and if he's not, what is going on behind the scenes. For people who are fully in the know, and I say fully in the know, people who have been watching long enough, they are at least, if not aware, because that implies that it's 100% certainty that they knew this, but had a sneaking suspicion that there was a bubble protecting Biden from the reality of his own presidency. Well, this article just confirms it. What I thought was interesting, and a good point that I had gone back and forth with a friend of mine, the idea at the very beginning of the presidency was to have a bubble around Joe Biden, especially because of his advanced age. He wanted to limit contact because of COVID. And this was something that was more of a practical matter than trying to insulate Joe Biden from anything else going on in his time. Was he maybe a little bit slow then? Yes. Was he maybe a little bit behind mentally? Fair. I think you could make that argument, but there was still life in his voice for the most part. But as we've gone through these 4 years of a really stressful job, you have seen it drain from him, whether it be the multiple times he trips upstairs, whether it be needing directions as he's going on stage, whether it be Jill Biden grabbing his hand in order to guide him to the right spot, or putting her hand on his back in order to get him there, or having pre-scripted questions that we saw on multiple occasions that were given to donors, or the instance more recently that was happening with the Pennsylvania radio station where they basically were told these are the questions that you can ask ahead of time, or Joe Biden going on to Morning Joe and having the papers in front of him that you can hear that he's crinkling as he's trying to respond to some of their questions and get back to his talking points. So there's been no doubt in the mind of people that something isn't necessarily right here, that there is a layer protecting Joe Biden from some of the more critical decisions that they're trying to ease him into the position. They're trying to make it easier with later meetings, not long days, trying to have different cutoffs on press coverage or not necessarily as much interaction with the press without it being scripted. All of these things gave us a clue that Joe Biden wasn't on top of it. And one of the great examples that we learned after the fact is that his poll numbers were, even his internal poll numbers were absolutely terrible. And yet his advisors kept cherry picking the information that made it seem like he was on top. And that's why he was so confident when he was going out there. Not only were the speeches prepared that way, and not only did he want to not pretend, but give a winning message, and he wanted to seem confident. It also turns out it wasn't just him blustering. It was the fact that he wasn't even getting the bad information. So let's actually jump into some of the critiques, the analysis, and even just the stories that are provided in this story. Quote, to adapt to the White House around the needs of a diminished leader, they told advisors to keep meetings focused. Interactions with senior Democratic lawmakers and sub-cabinet members, including powerful secretaries such as Defense's Lloyd Austin and Treasury's Janet Yellen, were infrequent and grew less frequent. Some legislative members had a hard time getting the president's ear at key moments, including ahead of the U.S.'s disastrous pullout of Afghanistan. And it goes on to detail how there were multiple people on the Armed Services Committee, on the Intelligence Committee, all these different committees that were trying to get the ear of Biden, essentially. Were trying to talk about whether it was Afghanistan or any other given issue that they saw on the horizon, and they were not able to penetrate the bubble. They weren't able to get in the room with the president. This is outrageous. This is not something that is okay, period, full stop. I don't care if you have the best advisors in the world. I don't care if you have the best gatekeepers in the world. We're not trying to deny that gatekeepers need to exist to some degree. Should I be able to just call up the president and say, hey, I have a concern? If I'm, imagine just me, obviously not, but even if I'm a junior member on the Hill, should I be able to just call up Joe Biden and say, I have these concerns, you need to worry about this? No, of course, there's going to be gatekeeping, but that doesn't mean that you can completely shut people out, that you can redirect them to other people within the administration and hope the information gets to Joe Biden in a clear way, or hope that a proper decision can be made based on half the information, because guess what? Joe Biden's not going to get all of it, or to pretend as though you're making an informed decision when you have not even heard the opinions of other people, and the president might not even know the fact that he hasn't heard everybody's opinions, the contrary opinions, because his advisors are protecting him so heavily in a bubble. Like I said, the article details how this actually started during COVID, and I think that's fair enough. The idea being, well, we want to make sure that Joe Biden is safe. But that doesn't mean that when you have the leader of the free world in any given situation, that you can just give an excuse that, oh, he needs to be protected, and then build an entire system around that, essentially, as he starts to have some mental decline in order to benefit yourself, in order to give yourself more power. Not saying all these people were doing it for egotistical reasons. They could have had very genuine reasons, which is they wanted to protect Joe Biden, or they wanted to protect the United States. They didn't want to let on to how bad he's doing. I'm not trying to attribute malice to them, but I also think it's hard to deny that there is an element of pride that had to play into it somewhere, even if it's on a subconscious level. And maybe that's just me being cynical about people. But imagine saying, I have the keys to the White House as this given for this given foreign policy, this given policy. I have the keys to the White House. I'm the liaison. I'm the point guy on all of this. I take all the information to Joe Biden. I'm actually making some critical decisions. I'm sitting down in the room with the other people that can make these sort of things happen, whether it be cabinet members, whether it be senior members on the Hill or junior members on the Hill. I think that is something that's enticing to a lot of people. And when you have an opportunity like this, when you have a Joe Biden president who, not necessarily say is inept, but definitely was less capable of doing the job later on and needed more people around him that were functional and were able to actually get things done, those people were able to take on more responsibility. And you can actually, I don't want to say laud at that, but you can at least wave it around later on a resume saying, hey, I was the head of this. I was the point guy on this. You know what I was doing. If you go to one of your friends who you were working with at the time, you say, you know what I was doing behind the scenes. You know what was happening with Joe Biden. All those policies that you liked from him actually came from me. I think that definitely plays into it to some degree. But the most fascinating part in here that has nothing to do with the campaign, just the time in the White House, because the campaign section is also fascinating. We'll save that towards the back half of this segment. It'll probably go to about 20 minutes, so if you want to skip to it, it'll probably be around 17 and a half minutes where we'll dive into the part that was more about the campaign, is the section labeled Good Days and Bad Days. Quote, Biden, now 82, has long operated with a tight-knit inner circle of advisors. The protective culture inside the White House was intensified because Biden started his presidency at the height of the COVID pandemic. We outlined this, and it makes some sense, especially given his advanced age. Quote, his staff took great care to prevent him from catching the virus by limiting in-person interactions with him, but the shell constructed for the pandemic was never fully taken down, and his advanced age hardened it. Now, let's jump to 2 paragraphs down. Quote, the system put Biden at an unusually removed place from cabinet secretaries, the chairs of congressional committees, and other high-ranking officials. It also insulated him from the scrutiny of the American public. Ding, 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 ding. That is it right there. You should always be in contact with your high-ranking officials. You should always be talking with your cabinet members. I mean, for goodness sake, you put them into place in order to actually have them be effective tools for your vision of the country. And at least that's how I would see the presidency. Some people would disagree. But the point being that those are givens. But the part where he is insulated from the scrutiny of the American people, that is crucial, because I'm not saying that a true leader has to be willing to cowtail, that a true leader has to listen to what the people say and take it by heart and give up all of his objectives, give up all of his policy priorities. No, no, no. A good leader will push through criticism sometimes. A good leader will understand where people are coming from and disagree and continue to lead them in a good direction. Sometimes leaders know better, and sometimes the American people know better. But that's also why we put people in office with our democratic republic system. We don't just put them in office because we agree with what everything they say. We put them in office because they are good leaders, and we trust, even when they make decisions that we do not agree with, that it is for either our better interest, the America's better interest, and that they can lead effectively. Sometimes leaders do things that you don't like. That doesn't mean that they're bad choices, and it doesn't mean that there's good reasoning. There's not good reasoning behind them. Now, that all to say, you still have to be aware of the criticisms. Just because you're going to possibly ignore them, just because you're going to take a different direction, that doesn't mean you can just ignore what the people are saying. You can take it into consideration. You can listen and then still choose to do whatever you want to do. But if you're not aware of where the criticisms are coming from, how can you even try to address any of those issues? How can you even try to assuage any fears? How can you be responsive to any degree whatsoever? If you just live in a bubble that says, oh, you're the best, you are the best, Joe Biden, your poll numbers are looking amazing, people absolutely love you, all your policy is love, 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 Bidenomics is just transitory, nobody's feeling the pressure from it. All of these lies leave you so disconnected from the people that you are trying to represent that you become a messenger who is deaf to any response, whether good or bad. And honestly, an overload of good, because I'm sure that his advisors gave him plenty of good. When people loved him, they gave him plenty of good feedback. But even too much good is not just bad because, oh, it goes to your head, but also because it leads to a position where you can't necessarily distinguish. You can only see the good. You are only being told the good, meaning that the degree of good may not be as easily perceivable, or you are not able to perceive them as easily. And what I mean by that specifically, because I realize that is a bit of a jumbled sentence, though I think the sentiment is true once you understand what I mean, is the degree of good. If you only get good news, it is hard to truly determine how good. So let's say people had a rating scale. People rated a 5 out of 10 versus an 8 out of 10 versus a 3 out of 10. If you're all just getting good feedback, that scale is actually kind of twisted. It's not necessarily properly adjusted, because you also have to have the flip end of that scale and understand where people are thinking things are bad. And this does not provide an effective feedback loop, essentially. It does not allow the president to have a true understanding of what is going on within his country, because though he can lead through it, he still has to be able to acknowledge that there's something that he has to lead through, instead of just believing that he is God's greatest president, or God's greatest gift to this earth, and the greatest president of the United States ever. Now, here's another interesting part about how the daily interactions, or the daily system, worked at the White House. Quote, ideally, meetings would start later in the day, since Biden has never been at his best first thing in the morning, some people said. His staff made these adjustments to limit potential missteps by Biden, the people said. The president, known for long and rambling sessions, at times pushed in the opposite direction, wanting or just taking more time. And there's one other part that they talked about here, which had to do with the time when Robert Hur was actually doing some of his investigating. And remember, this was not necessarily the end of Joe Biden's term, but it opened up even more questions about his ability to lead, when you have time sitting down basically in a deposition where you are faced with hard questions that you have to be able to recall backwards, or recall different information from a long time ago. And you also, if you remember properly, this actually was concerning some potential campaign issues, or potential file document issues that were really important to show a distinction on. That's probably the best way to put it. And what I mean is, Donald Trump was dealing with his own document issues. So if you are able to deal with your document issues, say, hey, I actually fixed this, I'm not prosecutable, and come out of it squeaky clean, that's great. And he tried to. He really did. But then some of the transcripts came out. There was bumbling, there was mumbling, and the story, which would have been bad if he had actually been prosecutable, which he wasn't, because Hur basically said he was a kind old man, but it became something even worse. It became a situation where it is a true example of Robert Hur really pointing out how Joe Biden is behind the ball, and that is at the very beginning of the good and bad days section. But like I said, somewhere around 1730, we're going to get to the election, because this is where, honestly, the insulation was the most egregious. It was on the campaign. Quote, some donors said they noticed how staff stepped in to mask other signs of decline. Throughout his presidency, and especially later in the term, Biden was assisted by a small group of aides who were laser focused on him in a far different way than when he was vice president, or how former presidents Bill Clinton or Obama were staffed during their presidencies. At some events, the Biden campaign printed in the pre-approved questions on note cards and then gave the donors the cards to read the questions. Even with all these steps, Biden made flubs, which confounded the donors who knew that Biden had the questions ahead of time. And then it goes on to talk about how the polls, he wasn't necessarily getting the proper information. I believe it was Donnelly that was actually filtering out some of the bad things when it was supposed to be coming in. It was Mike, Donnellan, I believe. Is that how you would pronounce his name? Yes, Donnellan. So it was Mike Donnellan who was actually filtering out some of this bad news and making sure that it didn't make it to Joe Biden's ears. And it's one thing to run a presidency deaf to the people. It's another thing to run a campaign deaf to the people. If you don't know that you're making errors, let's be clear. I understand politics is a game for people with egos, and sometimes very thin veneer of a strong, confident ego. So sometimes you have to shield the candidate from information. You have to present good and bad. You can't just come in with the bad and hand them all criticism, because it will destroy them. Trust me, I have a general understanding of that. But to pretend as though you are living in a world where you are on top and you believe the own crap that you are selling, that is dangerous no matter how thin that confidence is, no matter how thin that veneer of shine on the outside of any given candidate is. And that is the world that Joe Biden was living in. So I would recommend go reading this piece because, like I said, for anybody who already knew what was going on, it's more giving the process details, giving a little bit of the insider stuff, giving some names, some people that were actually able to come on and willing to go on the record here so you can actually back up some of the ideas that you already had. But for those of you who have not been fully on top of it and haven't been watching this from the very first second, I would go read it. It is a good read. It is long, so dedicate, at least me, I was slow, so dedicate a good 20 minutes to it. I think most people could probably get through it in about 15 minutes if you're a quick reader. But with that said, let's jump to our second article that comes from the Daily Wire. Republicans pull the plug on Speaker Johnson's spending deal. So this is a great article to talk about the transition between a Joe Biden term and the Trump term, because Johnson's trying to get a new temporary spending bill on the floor, make sure everything's solved and good to go by the time Trump gets into office. And if it's not passed, then by Saturday there can be budgetary issues. People might not have to or might be able to perform some of their functions within the government. And Donald Trump came in with a blaze of glory and basically said, buddy, no, we're going to shut this down right now. So here's actually a quote from the article, and it is also a tweet that is summarized that Donald Trump put out. Quote, sounds like the ridiculous and extraordinary expensive continued revolution plus is dying fast. But can anyone imagine passing it without either terminating or extending the debt ceiling guillotine coming up in June? Trump posted on social media. Quote, unless the Democrats terminate or substantively extend the debt ceiling now, I will fight till the end. This is a nasty trap set in place by the radical left Democrats, end quote. And I think that you can understand and probably empathize with his reasoning, which is if they're not going to extend the debt ceiling, if they're going to pass this and know full well that June they'll be able to loud it over the head of Donald Trump because they're going to try to put him in a political situation like Mike Johnson did with Biden once or twice over the one more specifically that we remember over the debt ceiling, he's not wrong. Does that mean that he should be going out and killing this before he even gets into office? To some degree, I think you can make an argument that he may not feel the consequences as much as Biden would because it's still technically Biden's presidency, but also Donald Trump is the president-elect. And do you want chaos before you come into office? Maybe in his world you do. In general, I would say it's probably not the smartest move to bring back one of the largest criticism of his first term, which is it was chaotic, and have it going even before he takes the oath of office again. But hey, that is enough on that part of it specifically. Let's go into the rest of what they are saying here. Quote, also, the Communist Global Engagement Center, a project of crooked Hillary Clinton, should not in any way, shape, or form be extended, and the shielding of very corrupt J6 unselect committee of political losers and thugs would be suicidal for any Republican approving it. Trump continued. Likewise, this is not a good time for Congress to be asking for pay increases, because that is another part of the bill to actually get paid more money. Now, I'm sure that reads perfect in Trump world, and I'm sure that reads perfect to Trump himself. It is a little bit all over the place to people who are not fully involved in the Trump dialect. But let's break it down. No funding needs to go to anything that Hillary Clinton's behind. No funding needs to be given to anything to do with protecting the J6 committees or shielding them. And we don't need to be giving Congress more money, especially as we are dealing with higher prices and the American people are trying to limit spending, or they want to see less government spending, and increasing Congress's pay is one perfect way to actually really make people frustrated. That's what Trump is getting at there. Is he right, though? Yes, he's right about I don't think it's actually let's be clear, he's calling it Communist Global Engagement Center. It's just the Global Engagement Center, and it's a Hillary Clinton project. We don't necessarily need to be giving more money to nonprofits and projects that are put out there by previous presidents. I think it's a weird game of political frenzies where they built the connections while they were in office. They did some things here or there. They helped some people out, and now they're paying them back through their nonprofits. So I think that is, and let's be clear, I'm not saying that Hillary's sitting there and just skimming money off of the top, but it still facilitates, galas or different vacations that they may do when they do conferences places. So these are just mechanisms to ensure that they can pay off their friends, or they can bring benefits to their friends while also getting benefits themselves. I don't think that government money should be going to anything like that, though it is not quite that simple. It's not like they're saying we're signing them a check, but even with some of the initiatives that they prop up and that they actually try to do, whether it be foreign engagement, diplomacy, things like that, we don't necessarily need to be giving money directly to them. I think that goes for any president, any presidential. So whether it be Obama, whether it be Bush, the only thing I think you could make an argument for, and I would agree with, is a presidential library, because I think having those records there are fascinating, being able to collect the different memoirs and insights of presidents so that they are in one spot as they pass on. They can also be historical monuments. I think that's a good way to build up culture, build up an identity, and also help shape the future perspective of citizens of the United States. And if you're going to spend federal dollars on something to that effect, it needs to be an effective, and I say propaganda, not because I want to say we need to propagandize everybody, but that is what nations do. They build up their stories, their national mythology, and they provide a narrative for the generations that come after them. And these are effective tools in order to do that. So basically, we have to build up our own story, and these libraries allow us to have fuller pictures of the individuals that ran our country. So I think they are actually fascinating endeavors, and I think that's okay to give money to those sort of things, but none of these special projects, nonprofits that they're involved with. The J6 shielding, he's just obsessed over this, of course. Once Trump gets in, he'll be or as he's leaving, he'll be pardoning his J6 friends, so I don't think he necessarily needs to worry about that one. And I agree that Congress is in a wrong place to be asking for money right now. But once again, does this all look like chaos? Does this all look like Trump chaos again? Wait, let's think. Yes, it does. If you think back to the time that Donald Trump was in office, it reminds me of most of the latter half. Let's be clear, I was 20 by the time he was getting out, so I remember that better than when I was 16 when he was first getting in, but that was also COVID times. But yes, it reminds me of the vibe of the first Trump presidency, and I think honestly he needs to cool his jets. Let him get in, give him a year of just normalcy, getting things back on track. Then you can go back to crazy Trump all you want. But his people love him for what he does, so maybe I am just wrong here. But we'll see if Johnson's able to get something else to the floor, because as of recording this is Thursday, about 3, it's a little bit earlier than 3, so I haven't seen any news of a new proposal coming out. So there may be federal workers that are out of a job or out of a position and aren't able to actually get things done on Saturday. So we'll see how this one unfolds. I don't think they'll be able to bring anything new to the floor in time. So Donald Trump may get what he wants here, and he is really threatening to primary people. This just affirms once again how much control he has over the Republican Party, because so many people have backed out of voting for this one simply because of his battle of words online, let alone the fact that he's not the president yet, and he is just playing the power game of basically the popular kids right now. So it'll be fascinating, no doubt about that. But that was a little bit of a ramble on that one. Let's jump to our daily delight, because we don't want to just leave with all these negative perspectives. We want to leave positive. So this one comes from outdoors.com. The headline reads, "Cute video of baby raccoons climbing tree has 14 million views." And it's true. It does indeed have 14 million views, but I actually want to read the caption at the middle part here, or the quote in the middle part. Quote, "TikTok user Jessie shared the video with the caption, 'I heart nature.' The footage shows a mother raccoon climbing a tree as her 4 sweet babies follow close behind. She stops a couple of times to take a head count and let the babies catch up." And honestly, it is adorable. She's moving fast. She's go, 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 go. And the little guys are just trying to figure out how to get up the tree. So if you want to see this cute video, or you want to read either of the 2 articles from today, both of the links or all of the links, all three, will be in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, on Pocket Cast, and on Podvine. Down there into the description, you can go to the RSS feed. You can subscribe there. You can download it so you can listen while you're on the road in the morning. Also, we are releasing on Tuesday and Thursdays now. We're releasing 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world. So this is domestic news, U.S. news with a sprinkle of other things, of course, because I enjoy talking about economics in other places. I enjoy random stories from other places as well. But that 6 and 6 is 6 international stories in 6 minutes or less. That is meant to be very easily consumable, bring you some of the top headlines from each given continent. Obviously, we can't cover everything, but we do it twice a week. So you can get that into your RSS feed, no problem. Same place. It's the same YouTube channel. It's every Tuesday and Thursday at 12, or over on the RSS feed. If you subscribe there, you'll be able to find it. Also down there is the Twitter handle at your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday as well. That's casual. It's off the top of the head. The reading schedule has gone crazy as we get to the close of the year, so it's a lot of reposts right now. Once I'm back on top of my reading schedule, that will actually allow me to have more creative ideas, bring different things to the table, and actually ruminate on bigger things rather than just reposting stuff. So stick around for that one. This is not the last episode before the new year, but I just wanted to give everybody the plans for next year, which is we should be returning to the Twitter tirade in full force. And we're going to try to have a new segment in the podcast itself, because now we're getting back into the dip, dive, dodge. I forgot how much I loved it. And we're going to try to get another games type segment in there just to spice things up a little bit. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.